The blood was still wet when Rowan Edwards pressed her palms against the Vampire King's torn flesh. She had been working late at the hospital when they brought him in through the emergency entrance, surrounded by pale figures with silver-white hair and eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. They moved with predatory grace, their voices urgent but controlled as they demanded a private room away from prying eyes. Rowan had been the only nurse on duty brave enough or foolish enough to step forward when the others backed away in fear. Now she stood in a converted wing of the hospital that few knew existed, a floor dedicated to the supernatural creatures that walked among humans in this modern age. The Treaty of New London had been signed 50 years ago, allowing vampires to live openly in exchange for following strict laws about feeding and territory. Most humans still feared them. Most nurses refused to treat them. But Rowan had never been most people. The Vampire King lay before her on the examination table, his white hair matted with blood that looked too dark to be human. His skin was alabaster pale, unmarred except for the deep gashes across his chest and shoulders. Someone had attacked him with silver weapons, judging by the way the wounds refused to heal, still smoking slightly at the edges. "You should be terrified," said one of the vampires standing guard near the door. He was tall and imposing, with white hair pulled back in a severe style. "No human has touched the king in 3 centuries. Rowan didn't look up from her work. She cleaned the first wound with steady hands, removing debris and silver fragments with surgical precision. The king's muscles tensed beneath her touch, but he made no sound. His eyes remained closed, his breathing shallow but controlled. "I'm a nurse," she said simply. "Fear doesn't heal wounds." She felt the weight of multiple gazes on her back as she worked. The room was filled with the king's guard, all of them watching her every movement with predatory intensity. One wrong move, one sign of malicious intent, and she knew they would tear her apart before she could scream. But her hands remained steady as she began to massage the torn muscle tissue, applying pressure to stimulate blood flow and healing. Modern vampire medicine was still a developing field, combining ancient knowledge with contemporary medical practice. The silver had to be removed first, then the tissue manually stimulated to encourage the vampire's natural regenerative abilities to take over. The king's eyes opened slowly. They were the color of fresh blood, ancient and powerful, fixed directly on her face. Rowan met his gaze without flinching as she continued to work, her fingers pressing firmly into the wound near his collarbone. "You're not afraid of me," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, with an accent that spoke of centuries lived through multiple eras of human history. "Should I be?" Rowan asked, extracting another silver fragment with her tweezers. She dropped it into a metal tray where it hissed against the surface. "Everyone is afraid of me." He said it as simple fact without arrogance or pride. "I am Konstantin the Undying, king of the northern courts. I have ruled for 800 years. I have ended wars with a word and started them with less. Humans cross the street when they see my crest. Other vampires bow and avert their eyes in my presence." Rowan applied antiseptic to the wound, watching as it bubbled against the damaged tissue. "And yet you're bleeding on my table. Seems like someone wasn't afraid enough." A ripple of tension went through the room. One of the guards took a step forward, but the king raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "Careful, human," the guard growled. "You speak to the sovereign of the entire Northern Territory." "I'm speaking to a patient," Rowan corrected, beginning to massage the second wound. Her fingers worked in careful circles, applying pressure to the torn muscles. "And right now, this patient needs treatment more than flattery." To her surprise, the king laughed. It was a low, rich sound that seemed to fill the room. "What is your name?" "Rowan Edwards." "Rowan." He tested the name on his tongue as if tasting wine. "An old name. Strong." She moved to the deepest wound, the one that crossed from his shoulder to the center of his chest. This one was still bleeding sluggishly, the silver having carved deep into the muscle. She would need to work carefully to avoid causing more damage. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "I have endured worse." "I'm sure you have." Rowan pressed her hands against the wound, feeling the unnatural coldness of his skin beneath her palms. Vampire body temperature ran lower than human, their hearts beating only once or twice per minute. She began to massage the tissue with firm, practiced movements, working to stimulate circulation and remove the silver poisoning from the damaged area. Konstantin tensed beneath her touch, but his eyes never left her face. She could feel the coiled power in him, the barely restrained strength that could end her life in a heartbeat. But she continued working, unflinching and focused. "The treaty forbids vampire-on-vampire violence within city limits," she said as she worked. "Who did this to you?" "Someone who believes the treaty is a mistake." His jaw tightened as she pressed deeper into the wound. "Someone who thinks vampires should rule over humans, not live beside them." "A rebellion?" "A coup attempt." One of the other guards spoke from across the room, a female vampire with hair like moonlight and eyes of pale gold. "Lord Valdir and his faction attacked the king during the council meeting. They believe our kind has grown weak by accommodating human laws." Rowan extracted another piece of silver, larger than the others. The king's breath hissed between his teeth, the first real sign of pain he had shown. "Hold still," she said quietly. "There's more embedded deep in the muscle." She worked in silence for several minutes, her entire focus on the task before her. The wound was serious, potentially fatal if the silver had reached his heart. Even vampires could be killed with the right weapons in the right places. As she massaged the damaged tissue, she could feel it beginning to respond, the supernatural healing starting to take effect now that the silver was being removed. "You have done this before," Konstantin observed. "Treated our kind." "A few times. Most vampires go to their own healers, but sometimes injuries happen in human territory and we're the closest option." She glanced up at him briefly. "You're my first king, though. Am I living up to expectations?" Despite herself, Rowan felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "You're less dramatic than I anticipated. No threats of eternal damnation or speeches about your terrible power." "Would you prefer I make threats?" "I'd prefer you stay still so I can finish extracting the silver before it migrates to your heart." He did as she asked, falling silent while she worked. The room remained tense, filled with vampires who watched her every movement with unwavering attention. But Rowan blocked them out, the way she had learned to block out distractions during emergency surgeries or difficult procedures. There was only the patient, only the wound, only the steady rhythm of her hands working to heal. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, she extracted the last piece of silver. The wound immediately began to close, the edges knitting together with visible speed now that the poison was removed. Rowan cleaned the area once more, then began to massage the healing tissue, helping to prevent scar formation and ensuring proper alignment of the damaged muscle fibers. "You can stop now," Konstantin said softly. "The danger has passed." "The wound might heal crooked if I stop too soon. Vampire tissue regenerates fast, but not always correctly." She continued her careful massage, working the healing flesh with expert precision. "Unless you want a scar across your chest for the next few centuries?" Vanity, Rowan Edwards? Professionalism. She felt his chest rise and fall beneath her hands in what would have been laughter if he needed to breathe. "You are remarkable. Most humans who interact with vampires either grovel or attack. You do neither." "I'm doing my job." "It's more than that." His hand moved suddenly, faster than she could track, his fingers closing gently around her wrist, not threatening, but firm enough to make her pause. His skin was cool against hers, his grip careful and controlled. "You touch me without fear. You speak to me without deference. You see a patient, not a monster." "Why?" Rowan met his blood-red eyes directly. This close, she could see flecks of deeper crimson in the irises, like rubies catching light. "Because you're a person who needs help. The rest doesn't matter." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges that made him look younger somehow, despite the obvious age in his eyes. "You truly believe that?" "I do." He released her wrist slowly, but his gaze remained locked on her face. "I have lived for 8 centuries, Rowan Edwards. I have known thousands of humans in that time. Warriors and scholars, artists and leaders, cowards and heroes, but I have never met one quite like you." "Lucky me," she said dryly, returning to her massage of the healing wound. The tissue was almost completely regenerated now, only a thin red line showing where the gash had been. The female guard from earlier stepped closer. "My king, we should return to the sanctuary. Lord Valdir may attempt another attack while you are weakened." "Valdir is wounded worse than I am, Serafina. My blade found his shoulder before his found my chest." Konstantin sat up slowly, testing the range of motion in his injured arm. The movement was fluid, showing no sign of the terrible wound that had been there less than an hour ago. But you are correct. We should not linger. He stood, and Rowan was reminded of exactly how tall he was, at least 6.5 feet, with the broad shoulders and lean muscle of a warrior. His clothes were ruined, torn and soaked with blood, but he wore them with the same regal bearing that others might wear ceremonial robes. "What do I owe you for your services?" he asked. "The hospital will bill your office the standard supernatural treatment fee." "That is not what I asked." He stepped closer, and Rowan found herself having to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You saved my life tonight. By vampire law, that creates a debt of honor. Name your price, Rowan Edwards. Gold? Property? Protection?" She shook her head. "I don't want anything. I was doing my job." "You must want something. Everyone wants something." Rowan stripped off her bloody gloves and tossed them in the medical waste bin. "What I want is for people to stop seeing each other as monsters or prey. The treaty was supposed to create peace between our kinds, but most humans are still terrified of vampires, and most vampires treat humans like cattle. If me treating you like a patient instead of a nightmare helps break down that barrier even a tiny bit, that's payment enough." The room fell completely silent. Every vampire present stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to fascination to something that might have been respect. Konstantin studied her for a long moment, his ancient eyes searching her face. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," Rowan admitted. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't move, his fingers brushed a strand of dark hair back from her face, the gesture surprisingly gentle from someone who could tear steel with his bare hands. "I will remember you, Rowan Edwards, and my debt remains whether you claim it or not. Should you ever need anything, call for me. I will come. I'll keep that in mind if I'm ever being chased by angry vampires." "See that you do." He stepped back, his expression shifting back to the controlled mask of royalty. "Serafina, gather the others. We return to the court." The vampires moved as one, flowing toward the door with inhuman grace, but Konstantin paused at the threshold, looking back at her one more time. "Be careful, Rowan Edwards. The treaty is under threat. There are those on both sides who would see it burn. A human who shows kindness to vampires may find herself targeted by those who hate us." "I've been threatened before." "Not by Lord Valder." His expression darkened. "He is old, powerful, and believes humans exist only to serve as food and slaves. If he learns of you, of your kindness tonight, he may seek to make an example of you." "Then I'll deal with that if it happens." Something flickered in his eyes, admiration mixed with concern. "Remarkable," he murmured again, then disappeared through the door with the preternatural speed of his kind. Rowan stood alone in the treatment room, surrounded by bloody gauze and the lingering scent of antiseptic. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat calm, but she could feel the weight of what had just happened settling over her shoulders like a cloak. She had just treated the Vampire King himself, had touched him without fear, had spoken to him without deference. She had made an impression on one of the most powerful supernatural beings in the world. Whether that was a good thing or a terrible mistake remained to be seen. 3 days passed before Rowan saw him again. She had just finished a double shift at the hospital, exhausted and running on coffee and determination, when she stepped out into the parking garage and found him waiting beside her car. He stood in the shadows between fluorescent lights, his white hair seeming to glow in the dimness, his pale skin luminescent. He wore modern clothes, now black pants and a dark coat, but they fit him with the same regal bearing as before. "You need to learn to be more aware of your surroundings," he said as she approached. "I've been here for 20 minutes. You walked past 3 other vampires without noticing them." Rowan's heart kicked up, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Were they your vampires, or should I be concerned?" "Mine. I stationed guards around the hospital after our encounter, for your protection." "I don't need protection. That is what makes you so dangerous to yourself." He moved out of the shadows, and she could see his face clearly now. The wounds were completely healed, no trace of the silver damage remaining. He looked powerful and healthy, every inch the ancient king he claimed to be. "Lord Valder has made inquiries about you. He learned of the human nurse who treated me without fear. He believes you might be useful leverage against me." Rowan unlocked her car, tossing her bag into the passenger seat. "And is he right? Would you care if something happened to me? Konstantin's expression shifted, something intense flashing in his blood-red eyes. Yes, he said simply. I would care very much. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them seemed ready to address directly. Why? Rowan asked finally. You don't even know me. I know that you touched me without fear when others would have fled. I know that you see people, not categories. I know that you speak truth without concern for consequence. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the parking garage. And I know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you for 3 days, which is remarkable considering I have lived for 8 centuries and thought myself beyond such mortal concerns as infatuation. Rowan's breath caught. That's not infatuation. That's gratitude because I saved your life. Perhaps, or perhaps it is something more dangerous. His hand rose, hovering near her face but not quite touching. I should stay away from you. My world is one of politics and violence, of ancient feuds and power struggles. A human in my life would be a weakness my enemies could exploit. Then why are you here? Because I cannot seem to help myself. His fingers finally made contact, tracing the line of her jaw with feather-light precision. Because when I close my eyes, I see your steady hands and fearless gaze. Because in 800 years, I have never met anyone quite like you, Rowan Edwards. She should pull away. Every rational part of her brain screamed that getting involved with the Vampire King was dangerous, possibly suicidal. But she found herself leaning into his touch instead, drawn to him in ways that defied logic. This is insane, she whispered. Completely. You're 800 years old. Does that disturb you? I don't know yet. She looked up at him, studying the inhuman beauty of his features, the dangerous grace of his movements. Your enemies will try to hurt you through me. Yes? And you're probably going to be overprotective and possessive about it. A slow expression crossed his face that could only be described as predatory satisfaction. Almost certainly. I should tell you to leave and never come back. You should. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, the gesture intimate and claiming. But you won't. He was right, and they both knew it. Whatever this connection was between them, impossible, irrational, and potentially fatal, it was already too strong to ignore. I finish my shift at 7 tomorrow night, Rowan heard herself say. If you're going to insist on guards following me around, the least you could do is buy me dinner first. Konstantin's eyes blazed with something that might have been triumph or relief or desire. I will send a car at 8, dress for somewhere elegant. I wish to show you my world. The vampire world? The court itself, if you're brave enough. He leaned closer, his cool breath brushing against her ear as he spoke. I want my people to see you. I want them to see the human who touched their king without fear, who treated me with kindness instead of terror. And I want Lord Valdir to know that you are under my personal protection, that to harm you would be to declare war on me directly. Using me to make a political statement? Using you to prevent a war? He pulled back slightly, his expression serious. Valdir believes humans are beneath us, worthy only of being food and slaves. If he sees me with you, sees me treating you as an equal, it undermines his entire philosophy. And if the king respects a human, others will follow that example. Rowan processed this, understanding the weight of what he was proposing. So I'd be a symbol. You would be yourself. That is symbol enough. His hand fell away from her face, and she immediately missed the cool touch of his skin. But I will not force this upon you. The court can be dangerous for humans, especially now with tensions so high. If you say no, I will respect that choice and continue to guard you from a distance. She should say no. She should get in her car and drive away and let the Vampire King find someone else to help him make his political statements. But when she looked at him, she saw beyond the dangerous power and ancient authority. She saw the way he had endured pain without complaint, the way he had laughed at her irreverence, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and remarkable. 8 o'clock, she said, and I'm warning you now, I'm terrible at vampire etiquette. The expression on his face was worth every risk. You are perfect exactly as you are. He disappeared between one blink and the next, moving with the supernatural speed of his kind. Rowan stood alone beside her car, her heart pounding and her mind racing with the full awareness of what she had just agreed to. She was going to walk into the vampire court itself, into the den of immortal predators on the arm of their king. She was going to make herself a visible target for every vampire who opposed the treaty and believed humans should be prey, not equals. She was probably going to die. But as she drove home through the city streets, she couldn't seem to stop herself from feeling excited rather than terrified. The car that arrived at 8 the next evening was a sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than Rowan's annual salary. The driver was a vampire. Pale skin, white hair, red eyes, who introduced himself as Marcus and treated her with careful respect that bordered on reverence. "The king speaks highly of you, Miss Edwards," he said as he held the door open for her. "It is an honor to serve you this evening." Rowan had chosen a deep red dress that she'd owned for years but rarely had occasion to wear. It was elegant without being ostentatious, the color rich against her tan skin and dark hair. She'd left her hair down in loose waves and applied minimal makeup, refusing to try to transform herself into something she wasn't. The drive took them deep into the historic district, past tourist areas, and into streets that few modern residents knew existed. They stopped before an ancient stone building that looked like it had been standing since the city's founding. Wrought iron gates swung open as they approached, revealing a courtyard lit by torches rather than electric lights. Marcus helped her from the car, then gestured toward the massive wooden doors. "The king waits for you inside, Miss Edwards. Walk straight ahead. You are expected and protected." Rowan stepped through the doors and into another world. The interior of the building was pure Gothic grandeur, mixed with modern luxury. Soaring ceilings disappeared into shadows above, held up by carved stone pillars. Tapestries that had to be centuries old hung on the walls beside contemporary artwork. Candles provided most of the light, casting everything in a warm glow that seemed designed to both welcome and intimidate. And everywhere, vampires. They lined the walls and filled the spaces between pillars, dozens of them, all with the characteristic pale skin and white hair of their kind. Their eyes tracked her movement as she walked deeper into the hall, glowing in shades of red and gold and amber. The attention was intense, predatory, but none of them moved toward her. At the far end of the hall, Konstantin waited. He sat on what could only be described as a throne, an ornate chair of carved wood and precious metals elevated on a dais above the rest of the room. He wore formal clothing that somehow mixed medieval and modern, black leather and silver embroidery, looking every inch the 800-year-old king he was. His white hair was pulled back from his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his features and the inhuman beauty of his appearance. But when he saw her, he stood immediately, descending the dais steps with fluid grace. Rowan. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a claim all at once. "You came. I said I would. Not everyone keeps their promises, especially when faced with a room full of predators." He reached her side, offering his arm in an old-fashioned gesture that somehow seemed perfectly natural. "You look stunning. You look terrifying." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur only she could hear. "Good. Let them see their king with a woman brave enough to tell him the truth." He led her through the hall, past rows of watching vampires who bowed as the king passed. Rowan kept her spine straight and her expression calm, refusing to show the nervousness that fluttered in her stomach. She could feel the weight of their stares, the predatory interest, the confusion and curiosity about why their king would bring a human into their sanctuary. They reached the dais, and Konstantin guided her to a seat beside his throne, an equally ornate chair that had clearly been added recently. The symbolism wasn't subtle. He was placing her at his side, in a position of honor and equality that no human had likely ever occupied in this room. "My lords and ladies," Konstantin's voice rang out across the hall, commanding instant silence. "I present to you Rowan Edwards, the human who saved my life 3 nights ago when Lord Valdir attempted his coup. She treated my wounds without fear, spoke to me without deference, and reminded me why the Treaty of New London was worth fighting for." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, too many voices speaking at once for Rowan to track individual words. But she caught fragments: surprise, disapproval, interest, concern. "Valdir believes humans are beneath us," Konstantin continued. "He believes we should return to the old ways, ruling through fear and feeding without restriction. But look at this woman. She is brave, skilled, and compassionate. She saw me as a person in need of help, not a monster to be feared or a tyrant to be obeyed. This is what the treaty offers us, the chance to live among remarkable humans like her, to build something greater than conquest and survival." A vampire stepped forward from the crowd, tall and imposing, with scars crossing his pale face. "My king, with respect, one exceptional human does not represent the whole. For every Rowan Edwards, there are 100 who would drive stakes through our hearts given the chance. And for every vampire like us who honors the treaty, there are those like Valdir who would slaughter humans by the thousands." Konstantin's hand found Rowan's shoulder, a protective and possessive gesture. "The point is not that all humans are good or all vampires are honorable. The point is that we can choose to see each other as individuals rather than categories. We can choose to build understanding rather than warfare." Another vampire spoke, female with golden eyes and an air of authority. "Lord Valdir grows stronger each day, my king. His faction numbers in the hundreds now. Vampires who believe the treaty has made us weak. Bringing a human into our court, showing her favor, will only fuel his rhetoric about you being corrupted by mortal sympathies. Let him believe what he wishes." Konstantin's fingers tightened slightly on Rowan's shoulder. "I have made my position clear. Any vampire who harms Rowan Edwards harms me directly. Any who threaten her threaten the crown itself. She is under my personal protection, and that protection extends to the full might of the Northern Court." The silence that followed was absolute. As Rowan understood what he had just done, declared her untouchable by vampire law, made her safety a matter of royal decree. It was an unprecedented level of protection for a human, and it painted an even bigger target on her back among those who opposed the treaty. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured, too quiet for anyone but him to hear with his supernatural senses. "Yes, I did." He looked down at her, his red eyes intense. "You are important, Rowan Edwards. To me, and to what I am trying to build here. I will not let Valdir or anyone else harm you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Konstantin never left her side, his presence a constant protective barrier between her and the other vampires. Some approached with genuine curiosity, asking about her work at the hospital and her thoughts on the treaty. Others maintained their distance, watching with expressions that ranged from disapproval to outright hostility. Through it all, Rowan kept her composure, answering questions honestly and refusing to be intimidated. She talked about treating vampire patients, about the challenges of cross-species medicine, about her belief that the treaty represented the best chance for lasting peace between their kinds. She was aware that she was being tested, evaluated by dozens of ancient predators who were trying to understand why their king had chosen to honor her so publicly. But she refused to play a role or pretend to be something she wasn't. If they wanted to see the human who had treated their king without fear, then that's exactly what she would show them. It was near midnight when Serafina, the golden-eyed vampire who had been present when Rowan first treated Konstantin, approached them. Her expression was troubled, urgent. "My king, we have received reports of movement from Valdir's faction. They are gathering at the old cathedral in the warehouse district." Konstantin's entire demeanor changed, relaxed authority shifting to coiled readiness in an instant. "How many?" "At least 200, and more arriving every hour. This is not a meeting, my king. This is preparation for another attack. Then we meet them with strength." He stood, and the entire hall seemed to respond to his movement, vampires straightening and focusing on their king. "Gather the royal guard and the loyal lords. We move within the hour." "You're going to war," Rowan said quietly. He looked down at her, and for a moment the ancient warrior was replaced by something softer. "I'm going to end this threat before it grows larger. Valdir has forced my hand. I can no longer allow his faction to gather strength and plan attacks. This ends tonight. Let me come with you." Every vampire in earshot turned to stare at her. Konstantin's expression went carefully blank. "Absolutely not. You'll have wounded. Vampire medicine is still primitive compared to human techniques, and I'm guessing Valdir's people aren't going to surrender peacefully. You're going to need medical support." "I have healers who can perform basic treatment, yes, but I've studied cross-species trauma medicine. I've worked with vampire physiology. If someone gets seriously injured with silver weapons, your healers won't be able to help them fast enough." She stood, meeting his eyes directly. "You said I was important to what you're building. Then let me prove it. Let me help your people. Show them that humans and vampires can work together, even in crisis. It is too dangerous. More dangerous than making me a symbol of the treaty and painting a target on my back." She touched his arm, feeling the cool strength beneath the fabric of his coat. "You brought me here tonight to make a statement. Let me finish making it." Serafina spoke carefully. "The king is concerned for your safety, Miss Edwards, but your point has merit. If you could treat the wounded quickly on the battlefield, it could save lives that would otherwise be lost waiting for transport to healers." Konstantin looked between them, his jaw tight with tension. "You would be in constant danger. Silver weapons, fire, vampire-on-vampire violence at its most brutal. One stray attack could kill you." "Then don't let any attacks reach me." Rowan kept her voice steady and confident. "You said I was under your personal protection. Prove it." Something flashed in his eyes, pride mixed with fear and reluctant admiration. "You are the most infuriating woman I have ever met. Is that a yes?" He was silent for a long moment, clearly warring with himself. Finally, he turned to Serafina. "She stays behind our lines at all times, 10 guards minimum around her position. If the battle turns against us, she is evacuated immediately. And she is not to engage in any combat herself, medical treatment only." "Yes, my king." Konstantin turned back to Rowan, his hand rising to cup her face with unexpected gentleness. "If anything happens to you, if you are hurt because I allowed this foolishness, I will never forgive myself. Then make sure nothing happens." She covered his hand with hers, feeling the temperature difference between their skin. "I can do this, Konstantin. Let me help." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his forehead against hers in a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. "You are either going to be my salvation or my destruction. Rowan Edwards. I've not yet determined which." "Why not both?" His laugh was low and strained. "Why not indeed?" The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and empty lots on the city's outskirts, the kind of place humans avoided after dark. The old cathedral Serafina had mentioned was a crumbling Gothic structure that had been scheduled for demolition years ago, but somehow never torn down. Now it served as a gathering place for vampires who rejected the treaty and the modern world it represented. Rowan arrived in an armored vehicle surrounded by Konstantin's elite guard. They had outfitted her with protective gear, lightweight armor designed for mobility rather than heavy combat, enchanted against both silver and fire. A medical kit that looked like it had been assembled specifically for vampire trauma sat at her feet, filled with specialized tools and treatments. "Stay in the vehicle until the initial assault is complete," commanded one of her guards, a stern vampire named Victor, with a scar bisecting his left eye. "Once the king has secured the perimeter, we will establish a field treatment station." Rowan nodded, her heart pounding as she watched through the vehicle's reinforced windows. Konstantin's forces had surrounded the cathedral, hundreds of vampires moving with coordinated precision. They wore black combat gear marked with the royal crest, a crown wrapped in thorns, and carried weapons that gleamed with silver coating. Konstantin himself stood at the front, white hair stark against his dark clothing, every inch the warrior king. He raised a hand, and silence fell across his assembled forces. "Dur." "Lord Valder," his voice rang out, supernaturally amplified to carry into the cathedral. "You have broken the ancient laws by attacking your king. You have violated the treaty by calling for violence against humans under our protection. I offer you one chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons and face judgment, or face destruction." The cathedral doors exploded outward in a shower of wooden splinters and stone dust. Vampires poured out like a pale flood, their eyes glowing in the darkness, weapons raised, and at their center, a figure that could only be Lord Valdir. He was ancient, perhaps even older than Konstantin, with white hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes like burning coals. His face was sharp and cruel, beautiful in the way that poisonous things were beautiful. He wore clothing from another era, embroidered velvet and leather that spoke of nobility from centuries past. "Surrender?" His laugh was cold and mocking. I am Lord Valdir of the House of Shadows, descended from the first vampires to walk this earth. I do not surrender to a king who has betrayed everything our kind stands for. You have grown weak, Konstantin, poisoned by mortal sympathies and foolish dreams of peace. Tonight, your reign ends. So be it. The battle began with explosive violence. Vampires collided in a blur of supernatural speed, weapons clashing with sounds that rang like bells across the empty district. Konstantin moved like death itself, his blade cutting through Valdir's forces with brutal efficiency. He was magnificent and terrible, 8 centuries of combat experience made manifest in every movement. But Valdir's forces were numerous and fanatical, throwing themselves against the royal guard with suicidal determination. Silver weapons found flesh, vampires fell screaming, and the air filled with the scent of blood that was too cold to be human. "Now?" Victor commanded, and the vehicle doors opened. Rowan ran in a protective formation of guards, crossing the battlefield's edge to a fortified position behind the main lines. They had set up a makeshift medical station using portable barriers and combat lights. Already, wounded vampires were being carried back from the fighting, burns from silver weapons smoking on their pale flesh. She went to work immediately, falling into the practiced rhythm of emergency medicine. The first patient had a silver blade lodged in his shoulder. She extracted it with swift precision, then massaged the damaged tissue to stimulate healing. The second had been burned by holy water, the skin blistered and refusing to regenerate. She applied specialized treatments from her kit, substances developed specifically for vampire physiology. More wounded arrived, faster than she could treat them alone. But other vampires appeared to assist her, watching her technique and mimicking her movements. She found herself directing them like a surgical team, calling out instructions while her hands never stopped moving. Apply pressure to stimulate blood flow. Vampire healing needs circulation, even if the heart only beats once a minute. Extract all silver fragments before attempting regeneration, or the wound will fester. For holy water burns, neutralize the blessed nature first with this compound, then treat like a chemical burn. Time became meaningless, measured only in the flow of wounded and the sounds of battle. Rowan's world narrowed to hands and flesh, and the steady rhythm of healing. She didn't think about the danger, didn't consider that any moment a stray attack could reach their position. There was only the work, only the lives that depended on her skill and speed. She was treating a vampire with a terrible chest wound when Victor suddenly grabbed her shoulder. "We need to move. Valdir has broken through the eastern line. He's targeting the medical station." Rowan looked up to see the ancient vampire lord cutting through defenders like paper, his eyes fixed on her position with terrible intent. Behind him, his most loyal followers formed a wedge, driving toward her with single-minded purpose. "He wants to kill you," Victor said grimly, "to prove humans are weak, to strike at the king through his declared protection. We need to evacuate now." "I'm not leaving these wounded." "You will die." "Then I'll die doing my job." Rowan returned her attention to the chest wound, her hands steady despite the approaching threat. "But I'm betting your king won't let it come to that." She was right. Konstantin appeared between one heartbeat and the next, moving with speed that made him nearly invisible. He intercepted Valdir 20 feet from the medical station, their blades meeting with a sound like thunder. The force of their collision sent shockwaves through the air, knocking smaller vampires off their feet. "You dare attack one under my personal protection?" Konstantin's voice was inhuman with rage. All pretense of civilized monarchy burned away to reveal the ancient predator beneath. "You dare threaten her? She is a symbol of everything wrong with your reign," Valdir snarled, their weapons locked together as they struggled for dominance. "A human you treat as an equal, a mortal you parade before the court like a prized pet. You disgrace our kind with your weakness. She is worth more than 1,000 of you." Konstantin twisted, breaking the lock and slashing in a movement too fast to follow. His blade opened a line across Valdir's chest, silver coating burning into the flesh. "She heals while you destroy. She builds while you tear down. She represents the future, and you are nothing but the past's dying scream." They broke apart, circling each other with predatory focus. Rowan watched while her hands continued their work, unable to look away from the raw power and violence of their confrontation. This was vampire nobility, at its most primal, ancient beings of terrible power fighting for dominance and ideology with every ounce of their supernatural strength. Valdir attacked again, his followers joining the assault, but Konstantin's royal guard formed a barrier, engaging them with coordinated precision. The king himself focused entirely on Valdir, their battle a blur of movement that took them across the battlefield and back. "You cannot win," Valdir hissed as their blades met again. "Even if you kill me tonight, my ideology lives on. Hundreds of vampires believe as I do, that the treaty is a mistake and humans should be prey. You cannot change 8,000 years of our nature with 50 years of legal documents. I don't need to change our nature. I only need to prove that we can choose to be more than predators." Konstantin's next attack was brutal, driving Valdir back step by step. That we can build instead of simply taking. That we can honor courage and kindness, regardless of what form it takes. And every vampire who sees Rowan Edwards working to heal our wounded, risking her life to save people who could kill her without effort, will understand that truth better than any speech I could give. Valdir's eyes found Rowan across the battlefield, burning with hatred and something that might have been fear. She is one human, an anomaly, proof of nothing. She is proof that the world can change. Konstantin's blade found its mark, plunging through Valdir's chest just left of the heart, not a killing blow, but devastating nonetheless. And that those who refuse to change with it will be left behind. Valdir fell to his knees, blood too dark to be human pouring from the wound. Around them, his followers began to falter as they saw their lord defeated. Some fled into the night, others threw down their weapons in surrender. Konstantin stood over his fallen enemy, blade raised for the killing blow. It did not have to be this way. You could have chosen to grow with our kind instead of clinging to the past. You could have honored the treaty instead of fighting against it. But you chose rebellion and violence, and now you face the consequences. "Do it," Valdir spat blood. "Kill me and make a martyr for our cause. Let my death fuel the rebellion you cannot stop." For a long moment, Konstantin stood frozen, clearly tempted. Then, slowly, he lowered his blade. "No. You will live, but you will live as an example. You will be held in the deep prison beneath the court, sustained but never free. A reminder of what happens to those who break our laws, and every vampire who thinks to follow your path will know that it leads only to failure and eternal captivity." He gestured, and guards moved forward to secure Valdir. The ancient lord screamed his rage and hatred as they dragged him away, but his power was broken, his cause shattered by defeat. Konstantin turned immediately, crossing the battlefield to the medical station with long strides. He was covered in blood, his clothing torn, minor wounds already healing on his arms and face, but his eyes were focused entirely on Rowan. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her shoulders and arms, checking for injuries with almost frantic concern. "Did any of them reach you? Did anyone touch you?" "I'm fine." She caught his hands, stilling their anxious movement. "Victor and the guards kept me safe. I was never in real danger." "You were in constant danger. This entire night was a risk I should never have allowed." He pulled her against his chest suddenly, his arms wrapping around her with careful strength. "When I saw Valdir targeting you, when I realized he meant to kill you to strike at me, I felt something I have not experienced in centuries. Fear. True, absolute fear that I would lose you before I ever had the chance to know you." Rowan let herself sink into his embrace, feeling the steady coolness of his body against hers. He didn't breathe, didn't have a heartbeat in any conventional sense, but he felt solid and real and safe, despite being one of the most dangerous beings on the planet. "I'm okay," she said softly. "And I helped. We saved lives tonight that would have been lost otherwise. Your people saw a human working to heal them, risking danger to help vampires. If that changes even a few minds about the treaty, it was worth the risk." He pulled back just enough to look down at her, his red eyes intense in the combat lights. "You are remarkable, impossible and frustrating and more brave than any warrior I have known, and I am falling for you in ways that terrify me more than any battle." Her breath caught. They had known each other less than a week, had spent perhaps a dozen hours in each other's presence. It was too fast, too impossible, too dangerous. But as she looked up at him, this ancient king who had chosen peace over conquest, who fought to build understanding between their kinds, she felt the same terrifying pull. "I'm falling too," she admitted, "even though it makes no sense. Even though you're a vampire king and I'm a human nurse and we're from completely different worlds. Even though your enemies will try to kill me and my life will never be normal again. I'm still falling." Konstantin's expression shifted through a dozen emotions too fast to track. Then he was kissing her, his cool lips claiming hers with 800 years of passion and need behind the gesture. Rowan kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, losing herself in the impossible reality of being held by the vampire king himself. Around them, vampires stopped what they were doing to stare. The symbolism was impossible to miss their king openly displaying affection for a human, claiming her in front of his entire court in the aftermath of a battle fought over the very question of human-vampire relations. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least he didn't technically need to breathe, Konstantin rested his forehead against hers again, in that gesture that felt more intimate than anything else. "I want to court you properly," he said quietly, "by both human and vampire custom. I want to give you time to understand what being with me would mean, time to decide if this impossible thing between us is worth the challenges it will bring. But I also want you to know that I am already certain. You are mine, Rowan Edwards, if you will have me. And I will be yours for however long you wish to keep me. Even though I'm human. Even though I'll age and die while you live on," pain flashed across his face, "I will not lie. The thought of losing you to time is agony I have not yet learned to accept. But I have lived 800 years, and in all that time I have never felt what I feel when I look at you. I would rather have you for your natural lifetime than spend eternity without ever knowing what it means to love someone like you." Tears burned at the corners of Rowan's eyes. "That's the most beautiful and terrible thing anyone has ever said to me. It is the truth." His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped down her cheek. "And whatever time we have, I will treasure it above all the centuries I have already lived." Then yes. She didn't let herself think about the complications or the dangers or the impossibility of it all. "Yes, I'll be yours, and you'll be mine, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." His smile was radiant, transforming his face from regal and dangerous to something almost boyish despite his ancient eyes. "Then let us begin tonight. Come back to the court with me. Let me show you what it means to be treasured by a vampire king." The weeks that followed were a blur of new experiences and growing connection. Konstantin courted her with the dedication and creativity of someone who had centuries of romantic tradition to draw from. He took her to vampire cultural events, ancient music performances, and art exhibitions that featured works spanning millennia. He introduced her to vampire scholars and historians, encouraging her fascination with cross-species medicine and supporting her research. But he also learned about her world. He attended a dinner with her parents, which was surreal in ways Rowan still couldn't fully process, visited the hospital to see her work environment, and asked endless questions about modern human culture and customs. For all his age and power, he approached learning about her life with genuine curiosity and respect. The physical side of their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Konstantin was hyper-aware of his strength and the danger he represented, refusing to let passion override caution. But his restraint only made the moments they did share more intense kisses that left her breathless, touches that made her burn, whispered declarations of desire and devotion in languages she didn't speak but somehow understood. He moved her into a suite in the court for her safety, though he gave her a separate bedroom and never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. Her rooms were luxurious but comfortable, filled with both modern amenities and ancient treasures he wanted to share with her. "This painting is from the Renaissance," he said one evening, showing her a portrait of a woman with knowing eyes. She was a vampire who believed humans and our kind could coexist peacefully. She was killed by those who disagreed. I bought this to remember her, to remind myself that the fight for coexistence is not new, only newly successful. Rowan studied the painting, seeing both the beauty and the tragedy in the unknown vampire's face. "Do you think the treaty will hold? Even with Valdir imprisoned, there are still vampires who oppose it." The treaty will hold as long as there are those willing to fight for it. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. Seeing you work on the battlefield changed minds, Rowan. Vampires who were uncertain about the treaty watched you risk yourself to heal them, and they could no longer see humans as lesser. You are helping to build the peace I have dreamed of for decades. She leaned back against him, comfortable in his cool embrace. I got a letter today from the medical board. They want me to develop a training program for other nurses, teaching them to treat vampire patients without fear. They think if more humans have positive interactions with vampires through medical care, it could help reduce the prejudice on our side too. Will you do it? I want to, but it would mean more time away from the hospital, more time spent in your world. Is that a problem? Rowan turned in his arms, looking up at his beloved face. 3 months together, and she still sometimes had to catch her breath at how beautiful he was, inhuman and perfect and hers. No, but I want to make sure I'm not losing myself in your life. I'm still Rowan Edwards, still a nurse, still human. I don't want to become just the Vampire King's human. Pride and love shone in his red eyes. You could never be just anything. You are yourself, remarkable and irreplaceable. And I love that you want to maintain your identity and independence. I have no desire to cage you or change you. You are perfect as you are. Even though I'm mortal. The question had haunted her for weeks now. She was 28 years old, healthy and young by human standards. But Konstantin was 800 years old and would likely live for 800 more. Their time together, no matter how precious, was finite. And she knew that reality had to hurt him, even if he never complained. Even though you are mortal, he said softly, I will not pretend the thought of losing you does not terrify me. But I have learned that it is better to love and lose than never to love at all. You have taught me that, Rowan. You have reminded me why life, even immortal life, is worth living. She pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into the contact, love and fear and determination and hope. When they broke apart, both were trembling slightly. Stay with me tonight, she whispered, not in the other room, with me. Konstantin's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper. Are you certain? I'm certain. I want all of you, Konstantin, every piece of you that you're willing to share. He lifted her easily, vampire strength making her weight meaningless, and carried her to the bedroom. What followed was slow and careful and intense beyond words. He was hyper-aware of every sound she made, every sign of discomfort or pleasure, holding back his strength but not his passion. And when they finally came together completely, Rowan felt something shift and settle in her soul, a sense of rightness that defied all logic and reason. This was her person. This was her love. And whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. The attack came 6 months into their relationship, sudden and brutal. Rowan was at the hospital, teaching a class on vampire trauma medicine to a group of nursing students when the alarm started. Emergency protocols kicked in, immediately lockdown procedures designed to protect against supernatural threats. But the attackers moved too fast, coordinated too well. They were vampires, but not ones Rowan recognized. They wore masks and moved with military precision, overwhelming security and heading straight for the supernatural treatment ward. Straight for her. She ran, along with her students, toward the emergency exits. But the attackers cut them off, surrounding them with preternatural speed. One of them stepped forward, removing his mask to reveal a young vampire with fanatical eyes. Rowan Edwards, Lord Valdir sends his regards from his prison cell. Her blood went cold. Valdir is locked away. He can't hurt anyone. But his followers can. Did you think imprisoning our lord would end our cause? The vampire circled her slowly, predatory and confident. You are the symbol of everything we despise, a human who dares to treat vampires as equals, who has bewitched our king with mortal weakness. Your death will prove that humans are fragile, that the treaty is a mistake, that vampires should rule, not negotiate. If you kill me, Konstantin will destroy every one of you. Let him try. Our numbers grow daily. Vampires tired of bowing to human laws and pretending mortality has value. The vampire's hand shot out, grabbing her throat with crushing strength. Your death will be the spark that ignites the revolution Valder started, and the king will learn that loving a human only brings pain." Rowan couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. She was going to die, and all the progress they had made toward peace would die with her. Valder's followers would use her death as a rallying cry, proof that humans were weak and unworthy of respect. She refused to let that happen. With the last of her strength, she grabbed the syringe from her pocket, a concentrated dose of vampire sedative she carried for medical emergencies. She jammed it into the vampire's eye, depressing the plunger with all her remaining strength. The vampire screamed, releasing her as the sedative hit his system. Rowan collapsed, gasping for air, as chaos erupted around her. Her students were fighting back, using medical equipment as weapons, buying time for security to arrive. But the vampires were too strong, too fast. More nurses fell, screaming. One of her favorite students, a young woman named Sarah, went down with terrible wounds. Then the temperature in the room seemed to drop to freezing, and Konstantin was there. He moved like death incarnate, faster than the eye could track, more violent than Rowan had ever seen him. The attacking vampires didn't stand a chance. He tore through them with brutal efficiency, leaving only one alive, the one who had grabbed Rowan's throat. Konstantin lifted him one-handed, slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack the concrete. "You dared to touch her! You dared to threaten her life!" "I am not afraid to die for the cause," the vampire gasped. "Kill me and make me a martyr." "I will not give you that honor." Konstantin's voice was colder than Rowan had ever heard it. "You will live, but you will suffer. You will spend centuries in the deep prison alongside Valdir, and every vampire who thinks to follow your path will know that threatening what is mine leads only to eternal agony." He threw the vampire to his guards, then turned immediately to Rowan. His hands were shaking as he checked her for injuries, his eyes wild with fear and rage. "Your throat. He hurt you." "I'm okay." Her voice came out rasped and damaged, but she was alive. "Sarah and the others need help first." Konstantin looked torn between his instinct to care for her and his understanding that she was right. Finally, he nodded sharply. "Heal them, but you do not leave my sight for even a moment." She went to work immediately, triaging the wounded with practiced efficiency despite her own injuries. Sarah had terrible lacerations, but would survive with treatment. 2 other students had been knocked unconscious but were stable. The maintenance worker who had tried to defend them had a broken arm but was otherwise unharmed. Through it all, Konstantin stayed at her side, his presence a protective barrier between her and the world. And when the last patient was treated, and she finally allowed herself to sink onto a chair, exhausted and shaking with delayed shock, he gathered her into his arms with infinite gentleness. "I almost lost you." His voice broke on the words. "I felt the moment you were in danger through our bond, felt your fear and pain. I have never moved so fast in 800 years of existence, but I was still nearly too late. You saved me. You saved all of us. I should have prevented the attack entirely. I should have anticipated that Valdir's followers would target you, should have stationed more guards, should have kept you at the court where I could protect you properly." Rowan pulled back to look at his face, seeing the guilt and fear etched into his features. "I can't live my life in a cage, even a gilded one. I have work that matters, people who need me. We both knew there would be risks. I cannot bear those risks." His hands framed her face, careful of the bruises forming on her throat. "Every moment you are in danger, every second you are beyond my protection, I feel like I'm being torn apart. This is what it means to love as a vampire, Rowan. We are possessive and protective to the point of obsession. I want to lock you away somewhere safe and never let you face danger again." "But you won't." "No, because I love you too much to cage you." He pressed his forehead to hers, that gesture that had become their signature. "But I will assign permanent guards, and I will hunt down every vampire who thinks to harm you, and I will make it known throughout the immortal world that you are untouchable, that to threaten you is to invite my absolute wrath. That might make me more of a target. Let them try. I have ruled for 8 centuries through strength and strategy. Let Valdir's followers learn what it means to threaten what belongs to the vampire king." Despite everything, Rowan felt warmth bloom in her chest at the possessive declaration. She should probably object to being claimed so thoroughly, but she couldn't bring herself to care. She was his and he was hers, and the depth of his devotion was staggering. "I love you," she said quietly. "Even though it's complicated and dangerous and sometimes terrifying. I love you." His smile was radiant despite the blood and violence surrounding them. "And I love you, Rowan Edwards, more than I thought possible for my kind to love anything. You are my heart, my treasure, my reason for fighting to build a better world." He kissed her then, gentle despite the intensity of the moment, and Rowan let herself sink into the contact. They would face more challenges, more attacks, more opposition from those who rejected the treaty and everything it represented. But they would face it together, vampire king and human nurse, building the peace their world desperately needed. The trial of the attackers took place in the vampire court, a formal proceeding that brought together representatives from multiple vampire houses and the human government. Rowan attended as both victim and witness, standing beside Konstantin as he presided over the proceedings with regal authority. The evidence was overwhelming. The attackers had been part of a coordinated cell of Valdir's followers, operating under orders smuggled out of his prison. They had planned to kill Rowan publicly, to use her death as propaganda for their cause, to prove that humans were weak and unworthy of vampire respect. The sentence was harsh, but just imprisonment in the deep cells alongside their master, their immortal lifespans stretched out in captivity as a warning to others. But the real impact came from what happened after the sentencing. Konstantin stood before the assembled vampires and humans, Rowan at his side, and made a declaration that would echo through their world. "Let it be known throughout the immortal and mortal realms alike, Rowan Edwards is under my personal protection, bound to me by choice and affection. She is not merely a symbol of the treaty, though she serves that purpose well. She is my chosen companion, my partner, my equal in all ways that matter. To harm her is to harm me directly. To threaten her is to declare war on the Northern Court itself. And I will show no mercy to those who test this decree." He turned to Rowan, taking her hand in his and raising it for all to see. "But more than that, let it be known that I love her. That in 800 years of existence, she is the first person who has made me understand what it truly means to treasure another's happiness above my own. She has shown me that peace between our kinds is not just possible, but necessary. And I will spend whatever time we have together building the world she deserves to live in." The room erupted in response, some with approval, others with dismay, all with the understanding that their king had just made an unprecedented declaration. Vampire royalty did not speak of love openly. They did not bind themselves to mortals. They did not place human happiness above political advantage. But Konstantin had done all of that and more, making it clear that his relationship with Rowan was not political strategy, but genuine affection. Later, alone in his private chambers, Rowan confronted him about the declaration. "You've made me a permanent part of your legend now. Centuries from now, vampires will tell stories about the human who captured the heart of Konstantin the Undying. Does that trouble you?" "I'm not sure yet." She moved to the window, looking out over the city lights. "I never wanted to be famous or legendary. I just wanted to help people, to make a difference. But now I'm going to be remembered forever as the Vampire King's human love." Konstantin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You will be remembered for much more than that. You will be remembered as the healer who treated our kind without fear. As the woman who worked on a battlefield to save lives. As the teacher who trained others to see beyond species and category. As the person who helped bridge the gap between vampire and human in practical, meaningful ways. And as the one who loved you. Yes, and as the one who was loved by me." He turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "I know the weight of immortal attention can be crushing, but you are strong enough to bear it, Rowan. You have always been strong enough for anything life throws at you." She looked up at him, this impossible man who had somehow become the center of her world. "What happens when I get old? When I'm 60, 70, 80, and you still look like this? When I'm weak and failing while you remain powerful and eternal? Then I will care for you with the same devotion you showed me when I was wounded. I will treasure every moment, every wrinkle, every gray hair as proof that you lived a full life. And when your time finally comes, I will mourn you as no one has been mourned before. And then I will live on, as I must. But I will never forget you, Rowan Edwards. In all the centuries that follow, through whatever changes come to our world, I will remember the human who taught me to hope again, who showed me that love and peace were worth fighting for, who gave me the happiest years of my very long existence. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. That's beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. That is the nature of loving as we do mortal and immortal together. But I would not change it, even knowing how it must end. Would you? Rowan thought about it seriously, considering the question with the weight it deserved. She thought about all the challenges they had faced, all the danger and fear and opposition. She thought about the years ahead, the slow march of time that would age her while leaving him unchanged. She thought about the ending that waited at the horizon, inevitable and painful. No, she said finally. I wouldn't change it, because loving you has made me more than I was. It's given my life purpose and meaning beyond anything I imagined. And if I only get 50 or 60 years with you instead of eternity, then I'll make those years count for everything. His kiss was deep and claiming, filled with centuries of passion and devotion, and as Rowan lost herself in his embrace, she felt the bone-deep certainty that they had made the right choice, impossible as it was. The months became years, and their relationship deepened into something that defied simple categorization. Rowan continued her work at the hospital and expanded her training program, teaching dozens of nurses to treat vampire patients with skill and compassion. Her programs became a model for cross-species medical care, copied by hospitals across the country. Konstantin supported her work completely, providing funding and resources while carefully avoiding any action that might seem like control. He understood that her independence and purpose were essential parts of who she was, and he treasured those aspects rather than trying to diminish them. Their life together found a rhythm that blended both worlds. Rowan attended court functions and vampire cultural events, becoming a familiar and respected presence among Konstantin's people. He, in turn, participated in human activities, attending charity galas and medical conferences at her side, using his influence to support causes that promoted cross-species cooperation. The opposition to their relationship never completely disappeared. There were still vampires who saw the treaty as weakness and humans who feared vampire power. But the visible success of their partnership, the obvious genuine affection between them, slowly shifted opinions. It was harder to argue that humans and vampires couldn't coexist when the vampire king himself had chosen a human partner and treated her as an equal. 5 years into their relationship, on the anniversary of the night she had first treated his wounds, Konstantin took Rowan to a private location he had never shown anyone before. It was a garden hidden deep beneath the court, lit by bioluminescent plants that created a soft, otherworldly glow. Flowers that should have been extinct bloomed in carefully tended beds, their fragrance filling the air. I created this place 300 years ago, he explained as they walked through the ethereal beauty. When I was tired of politics and violence and the endless games of immortal power, I wanted somewhere that reminded me beauty still existed in the world, that not everything had to be about conquest and survival. Rowan touched a flower that glowed with soft blue light, marveling at its delicate structure. It's breathtaking. It has been my sanctuary for centuries, but it has been empty, devoid of the one thing that would make it truly complete. He took her hand, drawing her deeper into the garden to a central clearing where a fountain bubbled with crystalline water. You, Rowan, you are what this place has been waiting for all along. He knelt before her, an 800-year-old king bowing to a mortal woman, and drew a small box from his coat. Inside was a ring unlike anything Rowan had ever seen, an intricate band of precious metal set with stones that seemed to hold captured starlight. This ring has been in my family since before the first human civilizations rose, Konstantin said quietly. It has been worn by queens and warriors, by leaders and scholars, by every person deemed worthy of standing beside a vampire monarch. I want you to wear it now, Rowan Edwards. I want you to be my wife by both human and vampire law. I want to bind myself to you for whatever time we have, to make official what my heart has known since the night you touched me without fear." Rowan's vision blurred with tears. "I'll die, Konstantin. In 40 or 50 years I'll be gone and you'll still be here, still young and powerful, living on for centuries without me." "I know, and that knowledge is agony I carry every moment, but I would rather have you as my wife for 50 years than live another 800 without knowing what it means to call you mine completely." His red eyes burned with intensity and devotion. "Marry me, Rowan. Let me love you as thoroughly as vampire and human custom allows. Let me give you everything I am for whatever time fate grants us." There was only one answer she could give, only one response that made sense in the face of such absolute devotion. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He stood in a fluid motion, sliding the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand specifically. Then he was kissing her, deep and passionate, pouring 800 years of longing and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking with emotion. "I will make you happy," Konstantin vowed. "Every day of our marriage, I will work to ensure you never regret this choice." "I could never regret choosing you." She touched his face gently, feeling the cool smoothness of his skin. "You've given me a life more remarkable than anything I imagined. You've shown me beauty and wonder and love beyond measure. I'm the luckiest woman alive. No, I'm the fortunate one. 800 years I waited without knowing what I was waiting for. And then you appeared, fearless and kind, and showed me what I had been missing. You are my miracle, Rowan Edwards, my impossible, wonderful miracle." The wedding took place 3 months later, a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions into something entirely new. They held it in the garden Konstantin had shown her, with representatives from both their worlds in attendance. Rowan wore a dress of deep crimson that honored vampire aesthetic while maintaining human elegance. Konstantin wore formal clothing from the era of his birth, updated with modern touches, looking every inch the ancient king he was. Her parents attended, still somewhat overwhelmed by their daughter's choice to marry vampire royalty, but unable to deny the obvious love between them. Her friends from the hospital served as bridesmaids, standing alongside vampire nobles in a display of the unity they had worked so hard to build. The ceremony itself was beautiful and emotional, with vows exchanged in both English and the ancient vampire tongue. When Konstantin spoke his promises, his voice rang with power and sincerity. "I, Konstantin of the Northern Court, the Undying, take you, Rowan Edwards, as my wife and partner. I pledge to honor your humanity and celebrate your mortality, to support your work and respect your independence, to protect you with all my power while never caging your spirit. I promise to love you with everything I am for every day you grant me, and to remember you with devotion for all the days that follow. You are my heart, my treasure, my reason for believing in a better future. From this day forward you are my queen, not by conquest but by choice, and I am yours entirely." When it was her turn, Rowan's voice shook with emotion but remained steady. "I, Rowan Edwards, take you, Konstantin, as my husband and partner. I pledge to honor your nature and respect your immortality, to support your vision and share your burdens, to love you without fear while never forgetting what you are. I promise to live fully and completely for however long we have, to make every moment count, and to help build the world of peace you fought for. You are my love, my partner, my impossible dream made real. From this day forward, you are my husband, not by conquest, but by choice, and I am yours entirely." The kiss that sealed their vows was witnessed by hundreds, vampire and human alike, all of them understanding they were watching history unfold. The vampire king had married a human, had bound himself to mortality by choice, had declared that love transcended the boundaries of species and lifespan. The years that followed were the happiest of Rowan's life. She continued her medical work and training programs, now with the full resources of the vampire court behind her. She expanded her programs internationally, helping to establish protocols for supernatural medical care around the world. Her work became foundational to the ongoing success of the treaty, proving that practical cooperation between humans and vampires could benefit both species. Konstantin ruled with wisdom and strength, using his relationship with Rowan as a model for the kind of cross-species understanding he wanted to build. Vampire-human partnerships became more common, more accepted, as others followed the example set by their king. The opposition never disappeared completely, but it shrank to a fringe minority, powerless against the growing success of integration. They traveled the world together, visiting vampire courts and human capitals alike. Rowan met vampires who had lived through the fall of Rome, the age of exploration, the Industrial Revolution. She heard stories spanning millennia, learned secrets that were ancient when her civilization was young. And through it all, Konstantin was at her side, proud and protective, constantly amazed by how she transformed every situation she entered. "You make them see possibilities," he told her one evening as they prepared for bed, a decade into their marriage. "Vampires who have lived for centuries in one way of thinking, you show them new perspectives. Humans who fear our kind, you prove that we can be trusted. You are changing the world, Rowan. One person at a time, one interaction at a time. You are building the peace I dreamed of for so long." She smiled at him from across the room, brushing out her hair that now showed threads of silver at the temples. She was 38 now, her face showing the first fine lines of age. While Konstantin remained exactly as he had been the night they met, she was beginning the slow march toward mortality. "We're building it together," she corrected. "I provide the example, but you provide the power and platform. It's a partnership." The perfect partnership. He crossed the room with inhuman speed, pulling her into his arms. His hands tangled in her hair, and she saw him notice the silver threads, saw the flicker of pain in his eyes before he hit it. "Hey," she said softly, cupping his face. "We knew this would happen. We chose it together." "I know, but knowing intellectually that you will age and understanding emotionally what that means are different things." He pressed his forehead to hers in their familiar gesture. "Every gray hair, every line, every sign that time is passing, they are beautiful, because they are part of you, but they also remind me that our time is finite. Then we make the most of every moment." She pulled him toward the bed, grateful that vampire physiology allowed for a physical relationship, despite the lack of conventional human responses. "We love each other completely while we can, and when I'm gone, you remember that what we had was worth the pain of losing it." They made love with the passion and tenderness that had only deepened over a decade together, and afterward, Rowan lay in Konstantin's cool embrace, listening to the almost imperceptible beat of his heart. "I want you to promise me something," she said quietly. "When I'm gone, I want you to keep fighting for the peace we built. Don't let my death turn you bitter or make you retreat from the world. Keep believing that human and vampire can coexist. Keep working to make that vision real." "Rowan." "Promise me, Konstantin. Promise that my life will have meant something beyond just our relationship. Promise that the work we did together will continue." His arms tightened around her, almost painful in their strength, before he carefully loosened his grip. "I promise, though it will be the hardest promise I have ever kept. But I will do it for you, because you asked, because you deserve to know your legacy will endure." "Thank you." She pressed a kiss to his chest, over the place his heart beat so slowly. "I love you, more than I thought possible to love anyone, and I love you beyond the capacity of immortal language to express." His lips brushed the top of her head. "You are my everything, Rowan. Now and always." 20 years into their marriage, Rowan was diagnosed with cancer. The doctors caught it early, but the prognosis was uncertain. Treatment would be aggressive, the outcome unpredictable. She was 48 years old, her hair more silver than brown now, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived, and she was facing mortality in a way that was suddenly immediate rather than abstractly distant. Konstantin took the news with visible devastation, his carefully maintained control cracking to show the terror beneath. "There must be something we can do. Vampire healers, ancient medicine, experimental treatments." "I'm already getting the best care possible," Rowan interrupted gently. They were in his study, surrounded by books and artifacts from a dozen centuries. "Human and vampire medicine combined. The doctors are optimistic about my chances." "Optimistic is not certain. Nothing ever is." She took his hands, feeling the familiar coolness of his skin. I need you to be strong for me through this, Konstantin. I need you to support me without falling apart. Can you do that? He closed his eyes, visibly pulling himself together through sheer force of will. When he opened them again, his expression was controlled, though she could see the fear still lurking in the depths of his red eyes. I can. I will. Whatever you need, however I can help, I am here. The treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy that left her weak and sick, surgeries that took pieces of her body, radiation that burned and scarred. Through it all, Konstantin never left her side unless absolutely forced to by the limits of human medicine. He held her hair back when she was sick, carried her when she was too weak to walk, whispered encouragements and declarations of love through the worst moments. The vampire court rallied around their queen, sending gifts and well wishes, offering support in both practical and emotional forms. Her human friends and family did the same, creating a network of care that spanned both species. The solidarity was remarkable, a living testament to everything they had worked to build. 8 months after diagnosis, the doctors declared her cancer-free. The celebration was enormous, both in the human and vampire worlds. But for Rowan and Konstantin, the real celebration was private, just the two of them in their bedroom, holding each other with desperate relief. I thought I was going to lose you, he whispered against her hair, which was slowly growing back in soft silver. I thought time was finally claiming you, and I was not ready. I will never be ready. Shh. She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. I'm still here. We have more time. How much more? It was a question without an answer. She had survived cancer, but the treatment had taken a toll. She was weaker than before, more aware of her body's limitations. The doctor said she should live a normal lifespan, but what was normal when you had been through what she had? I don't know, she admitted. But however much time we have, I want to spend it really living. Not just existing or working, but experiencing everything. Travel with me. Show me the parts of the world you love most. Let's make memories that will last you through all the centuries after I'm gone. His expression was anguished, but he nodded. Anything you want, everywhere you want to go. I will show you wonders beyond imagination. They spent the next 5 years doing exactly that. They traveled to ancient vampire sanctuaries hidden in remote mountains, to underwater grottos lit by bioluminescent algae, to desert palaces that had stood for millennia. Konstantin showed her the world through immortal eyes, sharing places and secrets that few humans had ever witnessed. They attended vampire cultural events that happened once per century, massive gatherings of the undying where beings thousands of years old traded stories and formed alliances. Rowan met vampires who remembered the building of the pyramids, who had sailed with Viking raiders, who had witnessed the birth and death of empires. And everywhere they went, they continued their work of building bridges between species. Rowan gave lectures on cross-species medicine and cultural cooperation. Konstantin used his influence to promote policies that furthered integration and understanding. Together, they became living symbols of what vampire-human partnership could achieve. But time continued its inexorable march. At 55, Rowan began to slow down noticeably. Her hair was fully silver now, her face deeply lined. She moved more carefully, her joints stiff with the first hints of arthritis. She remained sharp and capable, but the physical limitations of aging could not be denied. Konstantin adapted to every change without complaint, adjusting their activities to accommodate her needs, providing support without making her feel diminished. But she could see the pain in his eyes every time he noticed a new limitation, every time her body reminded them both that she was mortal. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to the hidden garden where he had proposed. The bioluminescent plants still glowed with ethereal beauty. The extinct flowers still bloomed in impossible colors. They sat together on a bench beside the fountain, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. 20 years, Rowan said softly. The best 20 years of my life. Only 20 years. His voice was rough with emotion, a single blink in my existence, and yet they contained more happiness than all the centuries that came before. Will you tell me a story? She looked up at him, studying the beloved features that hadn't changed at all in 2 decades. About your life before me? I want to understand what you were like when you were young." He smiled slightly. "I have not been young in 800 years, my love." "Then tell me about when you were younger, when you first became king. What were you like?" He thought for a moment, his expression distant with memory. "I was harder then, more focused on power and survival. I had seen too much violence, too much betrayal. I ruled through strength and fear, believing that was the only way to maintain order among our kind." "What changed?" "Centuries passed. I grew tired of violence. I began to wonder if there was more to existence than conquest and political maneuvering." His hand stroked through her silver hair gently. "When the treaty was first proposed, many vampires opposed it. They saw it as weakness, as surrender. But I saw possibility. I saw the chance to build something new, something better than the endless cycle of violence we had always known. And then I showed up and complicated everything." "You showed up and made everything make sense." He tilted her chin up, his red eyes intense. "You were the proof I needed that the treaty was worth fighting for. That humans and vampires could not just coexist, but build genuine connections. You transformed my philosophy from abstract ideal into living reality. I just treated your wounds. You did so much more than that." His thumb brushed across her cheek, tender and reverent. "You gave me hope, purpose, love. You gave me reasons to keep building toward a better future, even when it seemed impossible. Everything good I have done in the past 20 years, I did because you inspired me to be better than I was." Tears tracked down her face, and she let them fall without shame. "I'm going to leave you alone, Konstantin. Eventually, my body's going to give out, and you're going to be here without me for centuries. That thought breaks my heart. And mine." His own eyes glimmered with tears that vampires theoretically couldn't cry. "But I will survive it because I must, because you asked me to keep fighting for the peace we built, because the world still needs the example we set, and because somewhere, in whatever comes after death, I believe you will be watching, and I want to make you proud." She reached up to kiss him, pouring 2 decades of love and devotion into the contact. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his one final time. "You already make me proud. Every day, every moment. You're an amazing man, Konstantin. The best partner I could have ever hoped for, and I'm so grateful I got to spend my life with you." They sat together in the glowing garden until dawn threatened, neither wanting to break the moment. Both understood that these times were growing more precious, that the end was closer now than the beginning. But they didn't speak of it anymore that night. They simply held each other and remembered all the moments that had brought them here. Rowan lived another 10 years, and they were good years despite the increasing limitations of her aging body. She continued her work as long as she was able, training the next generation of medical professionals in cross-species care. She published books and gave lectures, sharing everything she had learned about building bridges between human and vampire cultures. Her legacy was secured long before her death, her impact on the world undeniable. Konstantin never left her side unless duty absolutely demanded it. He supported her work, cared for her increasing needs, and loved her with a devotion that never wavered. Every vampire in the northern court understood that their king's time was divided. Now he ruled with the same wisdom and strength, but his heart belonged entirely to his dying wife. On her 65th birthday, surrounded by friends and family from both species, Rowan looked around at the celebration and felt overwhelming satisfaction. She had lived a remarkable life, had made a real difference in the world, had loved and been loved beyond measure. Whatever time she had left, she was ready to face it without regrets. That night, alone with Konstantin in their private chambers, she brought up the subject they had both been avoiding. "I want to talk about what happens after." His expression shuddered immediately. "Rowan, we need to talk about it. You need to hear what I want, what I need you to know before I can't tell you anymore." She took his hand, feeling the familiar coolness. "I'm dying, Konstantin. Maybe not tomorrow or next month, but soon. My body is wearing out. We both know it." "I know." The words seemed torn from him, but acknowledging it, planning for it that makes it real in ways I cannot bear. "It's already real." She squeezed his hand gently. "And I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, I need you to keep living. not just existing or going through the motions, but really living. Keep building the peace we worked for. Keep believing in cooperation between our kinds. Maybe even love again, centuries from now. If you find someone worthy, there will never be anyone else. His voice was absolute. You are my once in an immortal lifetime. I will love you for all my remaining centuries, and I will honor your memory by continuing the work we started together. But I will never love another the way I love you. She started to protest, but he silenced her with a gentle kiss. This is not negotiable, Rowan. You are my heart. When you go, that part of me goes with you. I will live on because you asked it of me, because the world still needs what we built together. But my heart will always be yours, even after it stops beating altogether. There was nothing she could say to that, no argument that would change his mind. So she simply held him and let him hold her, and tried to memorize every detail of this moment for whatever came after. The end came quietly, unexpectedly, on a spring evening 3 months later. Rowan had been feeling tired but not particularly ill. She and Konstantin had spent the day in the garden, reading together in comfortable silence. As the sun set, she had complained of being cold, and he had wrapped her in blankets and held her close, sharing what warmth his undead body could provide. She fell asleep in his arms, her breathing soft and even, and somewhere in the night, that breathing simply stopped. Konstantin felt the moment her heart ceased its rhythm, felt the spark of her life extinguished like a candle flame in the wind. For several minutes, he couldn't move, couldn't process what had happened. He simply held her, this woman who had transformed his world, and felt something inside himself break beyond repair. When he finally found his voice, it came out shattered. No, no, you cannot leave me. Not yet. We were supposed to have more time. But time had run out, as it always did for mortals. Rowan Edwards, nurse and healer, bridge builder and queen, was gone. The funeral was enormous, attended by thousands of humans and vampires alike. Representatives from governments around the world came to honor the woman who had changed cross-species relations forever. Vampire lords who had never bowed to anyone knelt before her casket in respect. Human dignitaries gave speeches about her legacy and impact. But through it all, Konstantin was distant, barely present. He performed his duties as king, said the words expected of him, accepted condolences with appropriate grace. But part of him had died with Rowan, and everyone could see it. The night after the funeral, alone in the chambers they had shared for 2 decades, he finally allowed himself to grieve. He wept tears that vampires supposedly couldn't cry, mourned with a pain that 800 years of existence had not prepared him for. She was gone, truly and permanently gone, and he would live on for centuries carrying this wound in his heart. But even in his grief, he remembered his promise. She had asked him to keep fighting for the peace they built, to continue their work, to make her proud, and he would honor that promise, even if it took every ounce of strength he possessed. The years that followed were difficult. Konstantin ruled with the same wisdom and power, but those close to him could see the melancholy that never quite left his eyes. He threw himself into continuing Rowan's work, expanding the medical training programs she had started, funding research into cross-species cooperation, supporting policies that furthered integration. The vampire-human relations she had championed continued to improve, her legacy living on in the countless lives she had touched and the systems she had built. Medical professionals around the world used techniques she had pioneered. Cultural exchange programs she had helped create brought humans and vampires together in unprecedented ways. The peace they had fought for became more stable, more accepted with each passing year. 5 years after her death, on what would have been her 70th birthday, Konstantin returned to their hidden garden. He had not been back since the night she died, unable to face the memories. But now he felt her absence like a physical weight, and he needed to be somewhere that had been theirs alone. The garden was exactly as they had left it, maintained by staff who understood its significance. The bioluminescent plants still glowed, the impossible flowers still bloomed. He sat on the bench where they had spent their last anniversary together, and for the first time since her funeral, he felt something other than grief. He felt gratitude. She had given him 20 years of the most profound happiness he had ever known. She had shown him what it meant to love fully and completely. She had taught him that mortality, far from being weakness, was what gave life meaning and urgency. She had transformed him from a distant, powerful king into someone who understood compassion and hope. "I miss you," he said to the empty garden. "Every moment of every night I miss you. But I am grateful, Rowan. Grateful that you chose me, that you loved me, that you gave me the gift of knowing you. You made my immortal existence worthwhile. You gave me purpose beyond power. And I promise to honor that gift for all the centuries I have remaining." The garden offered no response, but he felt a sense of peace settle over him nonetheless. She was gone, but she was not forgotten. She would never be forgotten, not by him or by the world she had helped to change. Konstantin stood slowly, looking around at the beauty they had shared. Then he turned and walked back toward the court, toward his duties and responsibilities, toward the work they had started together. He would live on, as she had asked. He would keep building the peace they had envisioned. He would make sure her legacy endured long after anyone who had known her personally was gone. And every night when he closed his eyes, he would see her face fearless and kind, touching his wounds without flinching, reminding him that he didn't have to be a monster just because others feared him. She had been his heart, his treasure, his once-in-an-immortal-lifetime love. And though she was gone, what they had built together would last forever. The Vampire King walked back into the world, carrying her memory like a torch against the darkness, and continued the work of building the future she had believed in. Because that was what love meant, honoring the person even after they were gone, making sure their life had mattered, ensuring their dreams lived on. And in the centuries that followed, whenever vampires and humans worked together in peace, whenever someone chose understanding over fear, whenever bridges were built between their kinds, Rowan Edwards was there in spirit, the mortal woman who had dared to love a vampire king and change the world forever.